And I know that there are a lot of people who have to have the evidence, they have to have the science behind it before they feel safe to believe it. And I would say challenge yourself beyond feeling safe to believe something. Dare to go in and consider what would just have your life go in a way where you feel more like you.
Hello and welcome to The Secret of My Success. This is the podcast where we explore what it means to live a fulfilling life. I am your host, Erin Curran. So on today's episode, I am speaking with Melanie Paez. Now, Melanie is a sanctuary for the soul. She has a nomadic heart, a love for humanity, and a deep connection with people's passions. She's a powerful blend of gentleness and rigor, compassion and stand, all things that support in transforming a life and living fully. Enjoy the episode. Awesome. So, Melanie, welcome to The Secret of My Success. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here.
So, normally what I do is I ask my guests to go ahead and get us started someplace in the process. You and I have known each other for a very long time, so there are a million different places that we can go. Where would you like to start, whether it's an event or an experience, or if it's a process that you tend to use that you'd like to start talking about and we can share it with our audience?
I think that because we know each other in the transformation world, I'll go with a process rather than a moment, because you and I
Okay.
both know that there are so many things that support people on a path. And I've tried so many of them. So have you. And so I'd say that there are plenty of turning points in my life, but that I want to highlight for everyone that there doesn't have to be this one big moment. There was never a moment where Mufasa came out of the sky and told me that my life had to change. I just would walk along and notice I don't feel like myself. And there has to be a myself that I'm missing. And so I would just keep seeking. And sometimes that meant moving to a different place or reading a different book or trying a different career. And I would say the most potent one, the one that you find me on now, is more in a consciousness space. A lot of it has to do with uh, integrating from sacred ceremonies or uh, turning toward being of more service rather than trying to fix myself, loving myself as access to serving other people.
That's really key. I think what you're pointing to is powerful. And it's like for the listener who's like, wait a minute, we just dove in really deep. I know it's absolutely perfect because all kind of people listen to the podcast. I think that what you're pointing to is really powerful because when I was doing the Landmark Forum for the very first time, there's this expression that they used where they would say that, like, late in the second day, when they have this particular conversation, that's when people pop, right? I never popped. And I would always get super frustrated because everybody's talking about people pop. And I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Like, what is that? And it sounds to me like that's sort of what you're pointing to when it doesn't mean like fireworks don't go off. It's not like all of a sudden there's a neon sign that's pointing, you need to go this way. It's more like there's just this little niggling, this little itchy part that's like something doesn't feel quite right. And sometimes, in my experience, those are so the quiet, they're whispers and they're nagging, but they're also not going to try to force you down that path. Is that
Absolutely. Yeah, that they're not going to force you. Some people have the one that forces them. Bottom of the barrel, if you don't change, it's going to be catastrophic. And I think that the thing that I really love for people to know is that it makes sense to have multiple times on your path where you get a redirection. It's not just this one big time and then you're fixed forever after that. Fortunately or unfortunately, there is no arrival.
Mm,
And to me, people who have gotten to an arrival before the end of their life have stopped growing.
yeah.
And sometimes I don't love the uh like yet another redirection. Sometimes I would like to rest in the path that I'm on, but if there is a redirection, I find gratitude in it because it shows me that I'm still becoming, that there's more Melanie to get to know.
That's true. I think as long as there is breath in the body, there is still more to experience. So, talk to me a little bit about this path. Um, is there a way that you like to tune in and listen to that inner guidance?
Yeah, one thread that has followed me in every redirection has been uh, this spiritual connection. When I was really little, I was raised Catholic, and this teacher told me that I could invite Jesus with me into my day. And I used to actually imagine like an imaginary friend holding hands walking down the stairs. And later on in life, I got more into like self-development work, and it was more like um, journaling to get me connected. And uh, what I noticed that followed me from when I was little until now was like automatic writing and channeling. I didn't know what it was when I was little, but I learned later that I was sort of tapped into a different kind of consciousness. And I will never pretend to know what's actually happening. There are so many different schools of thought of what automatic writing really is. I don't need to know from my intellect what it is. What I do know is that I get a lot of messages, a lot of support in living my day to day in from something that feels like a higher expression that
Mm,
really has supported me in moving through things in my life. And there are ways that I can tap into it deeper: journaling, writing, meditating, sitting in plant medicine ceremonies. That one has been likely the most potent. And surrounding myself with people who are just on a path of life that is for diving into the inner world.
mm.
And
That's really important because if you're not surrounded by people who are also seeking, then it can get kind of lonely and weird, right?
so weird. Yeah, I thought I was so weird when I was younger because I felt everything. And there was
Mm.
a moment in a grocery store when I was about 14 or 15 when I just was in the frozen section trying to grab something for my mom, and I started sobbing. And I was kind of a depressed kid, so it wasn't like shocking to be crying. That was like par for the course for little Melanie. But it just felt weird and different. And I went into the next aisle and I saw a woman on the phone and she was crying. And as soon as I saw her, I was like, this sadness is hers. And I recognized that. And I didn't know what that meant. No one had ever told me anything about having the sensitivities to be able to hold other people's emotions. But I started to piece things together that, oh, sometimes all these big feelings, all of these sensitivities within me are from people around me or from the experiences that are happening around me. And I started to slowly over time actually honor that I could tap into that rather than just writing myself off as overly sensitive.
That is to be able to tune into that as, what most people would know that as is an empath, right?
Yeah.
And it's the ability to experience the feelings of other people because we are energetic beings and our energy expands out beyond us, whether we recognize this or not. I mean, how do you prove exactly where this stops? I think it stops here, but really no. And it's kind of strange because I've had those experiences where all of a sudden out of nowhere I'll get angry or I'll get sad or I'll get upset or I'll get happy and I'm like, it makes zero sense in the context. Um, and as an empath, you can feel kind of crazy because you're jerked around all over the place if you don't understand who it is or where it's coming from, right? So how do you deal with experiencing other people's emotions, and how do you recognize what's yours and what's not?
I would say that I could go on and on forever about all of the little things that I put into place, all of the tools, all of the experiences that have helped me, um, you know, process being this way in the world. And the I'm gonna just go with the most potent right now because there's the like, grounding yourself and having a grounding practice or um, protection so that you're not feeling other people's experiences. But if you're an empath that's committed to feeling the world around you and you want to be able to keep your sensitivities alive, the thing that needs to happen is to get really real with yourself about the experience that you're creating of that. I The default for me was to suffer it, to be miserable, to feel like I was being flooded or imposed upon. And to be very honest, sometimes it still feels that way. But what I have to get real with in myself is if I choose to be a victim of my empath abilities, I will always have a hard time with it. If I'm willing to see it as a gift, if I'm willing to see it as something that I'm offering to the world and not from a martyr place, but from a like a true gift that I want to give my ability to connect with people in this way, then I have to get over myself a little and be willing to strengthen my capacity to feel.
Hmm. Hmm. Very true. I think also, part of what we were talking to a few minutes ago was the being surrounded by people who are like-minded, people who are also responsible in similar ways. Um, as an empath, like hanging out with chaotic people is not a good self-care strategy, right?
Totally. And sometimes we can't avoid it. Sometimes you work in a place where people are just going to be chaotic, or you have a chaotic family, or you're chaotic within yourself. And it's just really about getting real about that. When I'm around this person, it drains me. So I have to take care of myself after. If I am not going to make sure that I'm not around people that drain me, I have to put in practices before I see these people and after to tend to my sensitivities. Otherwise, you're just being thrown around all the time. So
Right.
for me, uh, I had a long childhood of not being able to separate myself from people that flooded my system. And as soon as I was able, and as soon as I realized, I'm like, oh, I don't have to sit in an office full of people who make me feel this way either. And I pulled myself up and I was like, it's the entrepreneur path for me. And that has been, you know, full of its own challenges. But I know that for my sensitivities, for my gifts, for my skills, the best thing for me is that I work for myself, that I have the ability to have a day where I don't see another human being, or I have the ability to have a day where I sit in a circle with other people who feel deeply. And even if people don't understand the depth to which I feel, they respect it. So that when I am in spaces where people don't understand it, I have some fortitude. And I still get knocked around sometimes. I don't um, know what I'm getting myself into, and it still floods me. But then I know the processes to take to come back to myself. And
Mm.
yeah, surrounding myself with people who understand what an empath is, who understand what a walk toward uh, belonging to yourself is, and that even if we're all doing it in our own way, they see my gifts. That has been such a game changer for me.
Well, self-care is absolutely vital. It's like you take care of the physical vessel, right? Like it's something that we should do. It's something that is part of our responsibility to be able to be on this planet for as long as we possibly can, if that's something that you're choosing to do. But there's also mental and emotional and spiritual hygiene, if you will, whether it's a chanting mantra based kind of a practice or a silent meditation. If if I'm not engaging in some kind of a practice for clearing the cache at the end of the day, and like you say, I could be very comfortably, quietly in my space for a couple of days without really feeling a need to go outside at all. And I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, there are times when it's nice to go out and get mixed up in the world and feel bumped around a little bit and experience the spectrum of human emotion. But there's also the aspect of like, I don't want to go to Target and end up around a whole bunch of people and I don't know where they've been and what they're up to. And especially, nowadays, I'm a practicing Buddhist, that, and many of the people who have watched or listened to the show for a little while understand this. When I started practicing Buddhism 24 years ago, the members would talk about different kinds of experiences. And now, with a heightened sense of the seriousness, the gravity of the way the situation is being portrayed, right? Even people who have peace-based practices are feeling like the world is falling apart and it's all just so overwhelming. Your practice is all about personal inner peace. Be responsible for where and when you can clear that out and understand that remaining in that energy or allowing yourself to continue carrying it is a choice.
Absolutely. And that sometimes where we are is where we are. And I think that sometimes it's like pulling yourself up out of a thing and saying, you don't get to keep choosing this. And sometimes it's like, I'm going to keep choosing this for a while. And just being able to get into the observer and say, I'm suffering. I'm miserable. I'm not pulling myself out of it. I don't have the tools to do that yet. But here's one piece that I can see that I couldn't see before. And
Mm-hmm.
here's the next piece I can see. For me, it's been such an incredible, slow and gentle process of self compassion because my inner voice has been incredibly critical of me. That's what I've brought in, whether it's from past lives or ancestry or the way I was raised or a combination of all of those things. It was a very harsh critic in there. And over the course of, especially in the last 8 years, instead of trying to prove that part wrong, like I had been doing for most of my life, I started interacting with that part. I started
Mm-hmm.
listening. Hey, what are you actually afraid of? What do you really think about me? What has you say this? And what I learned is that part really just wants to protect me. It's not actually that, it doesn't think I'm actually the worst at everything. It tells me I am so that I'll stop whatever I'm doing. And so rather than fighting and battling that part, I have compassion for that part. That part just doesn't want that thing to happen to me again. So instead of saying, get over yourself, we're moving forward, I'm like, oh, you're so scared that we're going to get hurt. Okay, can you hold my hand and just take this one next step? Okay, great. We took that step and you didn't get hurt. You down to take the next step? Oh, no, we can't? Okay, I'll slow down with you for a second. Or when it says absolutely no, we can't, and it's something that I do need to move forward with, like having a business and, creating success in my life. Like, sorry, we can't just stop and have a pity party. We gotta live our life. Then it's what are the things that you need tending to when it's getting overwhelming. I kind of think about it like as talking to a child. Like I was a nanny for a bit and this girl wanted to run across the street and she was going to get hit by a car if she did that. So I grabbed her arm and I pulled her back and it scared her, it embarrassed her, maybe it hurt her arm a little, but she didn't get hit by a car.
Mm.
And so that experience wasn't her favorite, but I had time to calm her down and talk to her about what happened so that she could understand it. And the next time we walk across the street, she reaches for my hand to grab it. And
Mm.
that's just, that's what I'm doing with that part of me. It's like sometimes I have to be a little more forceful about we're going to live our lives, but I take the time to explain it to that part of me so that the next time we're on the same side and it reaches for my hand.
Really powerful. So is that, earlier you were talking about automatic writing and journaling. For someone who might be watching or listening who doesn't understand what automatic writing is, not that we necessarily need a technical breakdown or to explain it, but kind of encapsulate it just a little bit. And then I would ask you to speak to, like, do you journal with your inner self as a part of the automatic writing, or is the automatic writing just something that comes?
Yeah, I'll say if people are intrigued by it, so many different people do it so many different ways. There are tons of published books that are channeled through automatic writing. But for me, I came to it accidentally. When I was little with my siblings and my friends, we saw a movie where there were seances, so we tried our own little thing. And what it ended up being was that I realized that I was tapping into something. I didn't know exactly what it was. And the way that I describe it is it felt like this energy that was coming toward the right side of my head from like a diagonal point. And um, it wasn't like hypnosis or taking me over or anything. It was just like this gentle presence. And then I would put pen to paper and it would move, not in my handwriting and not in my train of thought. My thoughts come in a different way. They kind of feel like they're forming from the inside out. Automatic writing, the channeling feels like it's coming from the outside and particularly from the right side of my head. I've never tried to analyze that. I just I'm grateful for it. So it started out with in my teens being something that a friend of a friend had someone pass away, and she was thinking of her and wanted to see if we could connect with her and asked questions that I wouldn't know the answer to, and then they just came out. And I had no idea how I was doing that, what was happening. Again, I don't pretend to know and I don't need it to be any particular thing, but that's how
Mm.
it started. So I've been able to on a more than an occasion, but frequently able to channel the essence or the spirit or the experience of a person who is no longer in their body. And I've also done a lot of work in being able to do channeling and automatic writing of what I would say would be like spiritual guides of mine. Perhaps they
Okay.
were never a person in their body, but to me, it kind of manifests as a light energy that is looking over me and has
Mm.
wisdom to tell me. And sometimes it feels like what I would describe as my higher self. So to answer your question, yes, the that it's sometimes like I know there's a depth of wisdom in me that I don't always tap into because of my human experiences and my fears and what I believe to be my limitations, but I'm able to go and talk to that part of me whether I have fully embodied it or not. It feels kind of
Mm.
like time traveling sometimes. Like the who I am right now can go back and talk to 6-year old me, and who I will become comes back to talk to me now.
That's really amazing. Um, One of the things that I've gotten into over the last few years is I've always felt like I've been able to accomplish more through journaling than through internal dialogue. And for me, it what I have worked out about it, whether it's right or wrong or indifferent, or if somebody else has a different experience, that's fantastic. But my head is a little bit chaotic, and I can't necessarily always tell who's doing the speaking when it's up here. But I have an experience of more of a dialogic kind of a conversation when it's on paper, as I journal and as I just trust myself through the process, I can tell the difference between two voices after a minute. And whether it's like you say, if it's, the inner child or source or spirit guides, whether it's the 6-year old Erin or the 12-year-old Erin or the 16-year-old Erin, um, it's for me a way to have that conversation be a little bit more real, um, in a manner of speaking. Just it feels a little bit more substantial, and I feel like it instead of the part of me that's trying to pull one over, getting lost in the sauce of, me knowing which, it feels like a shell game when it's in my head, but when it's on paper, it's more of a, okay, great, that's how you feel about this. Well, let's go ahead and talk about that. Well, I don't want to talk about that, so I'm going to try and talk about something else. Okay, great. Well, let's bring it back to the point, because you can't lose 7 sentences ago when it's written in black and white on the paper. It's like, but you
Yeah,
just said this. And now you're saying that. And I know it's not me that's saying that, it's the other side. Is that
totally. I think that a lot of people, maybe when they listen to something like this, they say, "Oh, that's a lot of work. That's exhausting." And they would take some other tactic. And honestly, if you can outrun it, go ahead. But I think anybody who's listening to this podcast has something where they're realizing that there is a really robust inner world that wants their attention. And in that case, this is a worthy process. And the thing is, all of us have a different process, and listening in can show you yours. And writing, like you said, it makes it just a little more concrete so that you can start noticing the different voices or the different energies that you're working with. And for an empath, I would say it's essential, because that is one of the biggest ways that I was able to learn what are the things that are coming from within me and what are the things that I'm absorbing from the external world. And that's oversimplifying it, because, you know, I believe in oneness and there is no actual external, but for the purposes
right?
of this conversation, you're able to kind of parse it out so that the human mind, the ego, the part of you that needs to know I'm Melanie and you're Erin, can actually feel the difference so that it's clear enough for there to be oneness. Otherwise, it's a spiritual bypassing of me just saying we're one and then not taking responsibility for the human expression of myself, which is a part of the path. Another way that I'm responsible for it within myself is I have a journal that's just about Melanie and my life, the things that have happened, the way I feel about it, how I who I am in the moment, my likes, dislikes, all of the things that make you a human. And I write it the way that I would write a paper. Like it's from my cognitive mind, it's from an egoic expression. There's some, wisdom and higher thoughts that come in because that's just who I am. But it's separate, even in a separate journal from the automatic writing that I do.
Really cool. Very cool. I think it's also key because, like you say, at the end of the day, we are all connected. It is all one. And it's, but we're in a dual experience. We are in duality for a purpose that is beyond most of us to really grasp. And so rather than fighting that experience, I choose to leverage whatever tools I can to try to break in, because for the longest time I was feeling like I was insane, because one day I wake up and I decide that I'm going to eat healthy, and I go out and buy, $100 worth of groceries that looks a particular way, and then the next day I'm going, there's nothing to eat. Like there's absolutely nothing here. Where are all of the snacks? Like, what the hell? And this is not the person who went shopping yesterday. And if I don't have a real line on, I'm very clear that there are 5 different aspects of me that are able to grab the microphone, like as I say, and I'm not sure if it was you that mentioned this stage. there are 5 different aspects of me that could be playing at any one moment in time. And if I'm not aware of who's running the show, then I'm confused by the direction that we go. And there's a probability, not a possibility, a probability that whatever I laid down yesterday will be undone today.
Absolutely. And the thing is that some people, when it's unchecked and they have no one in their life that tells them that they're an empath or that they are sensitive or that they have um, their mind created spaces for them to develop different aspects of themselves to keep them safe when they were younger, it gets pathologized. And when unchecked and unsupported, it really can turn into what is called and diagnosed as mental health issues. And sometimes it is that. Sometimes it's they're chemicals that need support in the brain. And sometimes it's just there is no such thing as normal. And we all have a, a life path and a process, and our lives are ours. And, you know, there's a school of thought that we chose them, we chose that path. And to be willing to remember that we chose it and that it's such a beautiful thing to tend to rather than to compare with someone else and change and fix and nitpick at, then it's more of a process of discovery rather than a process of repair all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And when we know that we're just discovering ourselves, then like how cool that you know 5 aspects of Erin that likes there's those are the 5 aspects that have a loud voice that want a say in your world. And getting to know them more and more, you're able to collaborate with them more and more. And you know, I see mine as like inner child, inner critic, and the protector. And
Mm-hmm.
then I, you know, higher self as well. And I can hear those voices and know exactly what they're doing to support me. Every single part of me loves me. And some parts show love in unhealthy ways because that's how I was taught or what I came to earth with. And my devotion to myself is to bring myself back to love.
Mm-hmm. And I really think that like the movie, the Disney movie In and Out, Inside Out,
Mm-hmm.
Inside Out. Yeah. That's the one where there's joy and sadness and envy and anger and fear.
Yeah,
And it's like it really does feel like a completely different person because the emotions really do evoke a different level of cognition. So like
totally.
even scientifically there are 3 or 4 different levels of the brain, from the lizard brain to the mammalian brain to the, the frontal lobe, and the different ways that we process. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs falls in line with the structure of the brain. And what we're talking about sounds super woo woo, but at the same time there are breakthroughs being created and scientific research around this, especially like Joe Dispenza is really big in this space, proving that meditation allows you to actually be in control of the brain state, whether you're in beta, alpha, theta, gamma, delta. So it like, for those of you who are going, oh, geez, what the hell is this? This is all just weird. Yes, and
Yeah.
it's like, if you don't understand what drives you, then you have no chance of breaking free. But if you start to understand some of the little toeholds that you can get, then at least you have the hope of being able to change lifelong bad habits that you feel like you've been at the effect of forever.
Absolutely. I think that just as we thought the earth was flat at one point and then realized that there's more, that we're not the center of the universe and that there's a globe, and you know, like the science grows with time and it has to build on itself. Science is our understanding of our inner world and our outer world, and it is as limited as our minds are. And we live in a timeline that is on the precipice of believing that our emotions, our experiences, our inner world, the unseen is real. And some of us know it, and some of us know that it's not true, like know it so deeply. And so when I know that, like Melanie, as I am, has to live in a world where it's still on the brink, all I know is that it serves me to believe that I have an energetic body, that time is a construct of our capacity to understand where
Mhm.
we are in the grand scheme of the world. I live inside of those rules because of the time that I live in, but I also expand beyond them, and I know that there are aspects of me that go beyond them. And if for nothing else, I only know it because I'm happier when I believe that. My life works better when I tap into my inner world, when I put pen to paper and believe that there's a higher self talking to me. If I got to the end of my life and found out that all of that was bullshit, great. I was happy. I felt curious. I felt surrounded by people who were like me. And that's enough for me. And I know that there are a lot of people who have to have the evidence, they have to have the science behind it before they feel safe to believe it. And I would say challenge yourself beyond feeling safe to believe something and dare to go in and consider what would just have your life go in a way where you feel more like you.
Really powerful. I have been listening to, I don't know if you're aware, Jordan Peterson interviewed Elon Musk.
I haven't seen it.
Can you hear the equipment?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like thank you. Okay. Okay, cool. So I'll circle back. One of the fascinating things that I got from the dialogue between the two was when Elon Musk said the question is whether we are the only ones who have consciousness or consciousness exists throughout everything in the universe. And his argument for the existence of consciousness in everything is that at the very beginning, there was only hydrogen in this tiny little whatever it was. And then out of the explosion comes forth all of this. And so, if all things came from that originating hydrogen molecule or whatever it was, then consciousness must exist throughout all of it. Now, that kind of circles back to what you were saying in my mind, where you're like, I don't know if this is really going to make a difference for me, but it makes me feel better. So this is what I'm doing. I kind of feel bad for somebody who can't have faith in magic when we live in a world where so much is created just from the ideas that we receive out of nowhere. Like, where do these come from? I don't know what your experience is, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I actually lost you for a second. You said so much is created and then it froze. Maybe we should
I
just
don't
like,
know why. I don't know why our conversation is so challenging. Um,
I think it's just like, on a spiritual note, when we started expanding into consciousness, the lawn people happened and then the internet happened. So we're gonna do it. Maybe we just
I'm
like,
yeah. You hear the guy outside the door?
yeah.
I need to evaluate my life choices.
I think
Well,
it's great. I didn't hear fully this last piece that you were going into with the
don't worry
oh.
about it. So there's causality.
Erin and I are having a great time over here because we were just about to break into the universe being created and the internet went out and there's sound over there on her end and we're just coming back to ourselves to be able to keep having the chat. This is, you know, such par for the course when you and I talk about existentialism or consciousness, always some kind of silliness happens, whether we think it's silly in the moment or we're super frustrated by it. It's all there's a disruption. And sometimes I used to think that it was like a disruption that was like, oh, this is like dragging me down. It's another thing to overcome. The whole like thought that God is a kid with a magnifying glass sort of way of thinking of it.
Oh yeah.
And then I kind of started thinking like it's just a reset, you know? If you and I were getting into a place where we were about to be really smart about the creation of the universe, we got this reset of like you're still a person. Your internet goes out. You hear people outside and it's for me it's a moment of humbling, which I there it is. And maybe we just keep that part in that here we
I'm going,
are.
it's going in, for sure. I was having this
Yes.
wonderful conversation with Hope Long a couple months back, and there was one part we were getting to the really deep part of her story, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, her dog just was sitting at her door barking and barking and bark. And I just left it in, and like after a couple of minutes, we just started giggling about it because it's like after a little while, you're like,
Yeah. I was on with another host and her kid came in because there was a spider on the ceiling. And it's just like one of the things that I think is really fun for people to listen to and hear is they want to get on and they want to hear people who are have expertise in an area that they don't. They want to know that things are going to be okay and that they have tools to walk away with to make their life better. And another great aspect to know that you and I are willing to provide is that we're still people and that like there is no arrival, there is no perfection. Even though you and I have done tons of work in transformation, Wayne Dyer said something like, I still have to wait at red lights. And that hit me right between the eyes because I realized that I had, before reading those words of his, I had been on the path to self discovery as a way to fix my life, to make it better, so that there would be no distractions, no upset, no frustrations. Now, my goal is to know myself when there are frustrations, when there are setbacks, to actually give myself room to forget myself and then forgive myself in the process. This is not a way to like bliss where nothing ever happens to you again. It's a way to know yourself deeply and not abandon yourself in it. So
yeah.
I love that we, an earlier version of the two of us might have gotten fully thrown off by all of these distractions. And here we are laughing about it. The process is to like allow. And I think that, for people who are listening, maybe we are way like existentializing internet going out, but this is what we do and it's fun.
Well, I think, personally, my whole stand inside of the secret of my success is to tell people that the secret of my success is that I don't give a fuck when things go bad. I just keep going. I mean, okay, so people who are listening, I've talked about the book, Hate Your Way to Happiness. This is the coach that I had the conversation with when I was whining about my life not working, who said, why don't you just hate your way to happiness? And we both went, wait. And, that was when I really got that I was thinking that these challenges were an interruption to my life. And I remember seeing a meme on Facebook a couple of weeks ago that had said something along the lines of, so, this problem that you're experiencing, you're acting like it's an interruption to your life when in reality it is your life.
Yeah.
This is life. This is what there is to deal with. When I pray for patience, I don't get patience. I get the opportunity to practice patience. So that's when the asshole is definitely going to cut me off. Here I am in my dining room studio trying to be all, sexy and professional looking, and I have had these two conversations scheduled today for 2 weeks, haven't heard lawn people in 10 days, and all flippin' day it has been weed eaters, lawn mowers, and leaf blowers. And I'm just sitting here going, like, why? And the truth of the matter is, when you're playing a big game, everything that's not that is going to try to stop you. And if my goal is to put together a podcast where I talk to real people about real things, I'm going to be honest right now. The first part of this conversation was like, Melanie and I were talking about, just recording one of our phone calls. And it's like, well, we both are sounding really professional right now. And, it's good, but like, this is more real. So this is probably why all of this stuff has been going on, to shake us up and remind us that that stuff is all very nice, but that's not what's really important.
Yeah, it might just be that whoever is listening got as much as they needed to out of the polished version. And here we are, people, you and me, going through
Yeah.
the day to day. And the reason that I've been on this path and the reason that I will continue on it is not to make sure that nothing ever happens to me, but so that I can be with myself when it does. And
Mm-hmm.
that, it might be a lawn guy when you're trying to make a great podcast. It might be an internet going out when you're trying to be a guest on a podcast. It might be a death in your family. It might be a car accident. It might be losing a job. It might be something walking into your life that's the best thing that's ever happened to you and you don't know what to do with it. And to gather the tools along the way to get to know yourself more deeply, you have more of a shot to honor yourself in the way that you walk through your life because you
Yeah.
know who yourself is. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be smooth sailing all the time. It actually means that it very likely won't be, but that
Right.
we can just get more and more comfortable with being ourselves.
Also, just I could wait until I have enough money to pay for a studio that's got soundproofing and all of this other stuff, or I can just get over myself and start doing it from where I am.
Hell yeah. That I think is one of the biggest things for all of us is like we can look around and see perfection wherever we can find somebody who knows how to do it better and all of the reasons to wait until. And
Mm-hmm.
I've been on so many initial sessions with people where they say exactly what they want in their lives. Sessions as in coaching sessions with people. They'll come talk to me and they'll say, I really want to go start my own business, or I really want to talk to my boss and get this promotion, or I really want to be in a loving relationship. And then we'll talk about what it would take. And they say, okay, maybe not right now. And then they call me 2 years later, 3 years later. Has anything changed? No.
No.
Okay, but I'm still scared. Maybe 1 year later, 2 years later. And the thing is, this is not a dress rehearsal, it's your life. So it's imperative that you start like now, not when there's a soundproofing studio or when you know exactly the right things to say or you take that writing course or you get that certification. It's like the world needs imperfect people to be willing to give their gifts because there are
Yeah.
a lot of audacious people that are willing to um, take from the world to be self-serving in the world. And one of the things that I come across a lot with service-minded people is that they're so afraid of being perceived as greedy or as being not professional or not enough. So they sit on it and they wait. And the world does not change in the direction of their light then. And we do
Yeah.
no service to anyone to wait until we're good enough to be able to serve.
And you're never going to get good enough because you've never moved in any way to be able to evolve. It's not like, you're sitting inside of an egg and developing. There's always action going on. It's never just, okay, I'm just going to sit here and like eventually I'm going to get the memo is never coming because you haven't put yourself in the line to be able to receive the memo. The memo
Yeah,
can't come until you move.
that's so beautiful, Erin, because when I say it's such a simplification to say somebody gets on a session with me and then they call me 3 years later and nothing has changed. The fact of the matter is, they have perpetuated the truth that they couldn't have it for more years. They have sunk deeper into their inability for things, which is change. It's just changing the exact opposite direction of what they told me they wanted. So, as terrifying as it may be to take a step in the direction toward a vulnerable dream, if you're not taking a step in that direction, you're taking a step away from it by default. For some people, it's sufficient to get to their deathbed and say, "Oh, I wish I had." For me, I cannot and will not do that. And for the people who work with me, they cannot and will not do that. And I do make it that serious because it is. It's the one time I get to be Melanie.
It's really true. Yeah, there is no safe path in life. Life isn't designed to be safe. Life is designed to be lived. If your purpose is to get to your death in a safe way, it's kind of like what was your life for? I've never, over the course of my life, I've never known why I was always drawn to push harder and to heal and to learn more, because the desire for me to be safe and for me to stay protected and hidden has always been so great. I come from a space of, like, when I was a small child, I decided life was dangerous, and like there's been this inner part of me that has been struggling, fighting to get out. And there's a part of, like, I could say, well, at 57, why bother? Why keep trying? Or I could say, I'm better than I was. I've gotten a little bit farther than I would have. I can always take ground in small ways, and in ways that might feel insignificant to an outside person. I mean, I'm not like an Elon Musk or somebody who is just like lighting the world on fire, but at the same time, I know that for me, where I am today versus where I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, light years different. And as I get older, I begin to understand the importance of that and how I wouldn't trade any of that for the world. Not for the world.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. At the end of the day, there will be no one to compare to
Mm,
because we really are one. There will be no I I'm not famous or I'm not rich or I'm not beautiful. It will be I am me. And who is that? And
mm,
if we don't know, then what is it all for?
mm,
I think that the willingness to be curious about who we are and what we came here with and what we can do with it is such a beautiful path. I have really wanted to be an incredibly intellectual, logical, stoic person. I think that a lot of people in my world really respect that kind of person, that kind of like, you know, tighten up, ignore your emotions, be better than your emotions kind of person. I wanted to be that so badly. And at some point, rather than saying that that's the better kind of person to be and like really draining myself to try to become it, I started looking at like, well, who are you? And what can you do with that? And when I started doing stuff with it, it started really making a beautiful difference in the world. And I may not have, uh, whatever accolade someone who's entirely logical has, but I am mentioned in acknowledgments in many books. I have people who have come to me to say, I don't know if I would be here if I didn't know you. And what better life for me to live than to know that I have made an impact inside of the hearts of people. That's who I am. And it's totally beautiful that there are other people who bring a piece of like scientific knowledge that we didn't have before. And they're totally unemotional and they're in a lab and they taught us that, if you put these two things together, then you can cure this disease. Like, so grateful that there are people who are not like me, but I don't have to be like them to be valuable. And it is a daring, courageous, and sometimes grueling process to accept yourself and to know that you belong. There's, you know, I think that would be every turning point on my path. has had some kind of unwillingness to keep believing I don't belong
Mm.
because it has stopped me. And I've needed different tools, different support systems, different practices to be willing to believe that I belong, to be willing to see that I belong. And every time I do, I'm able to serve better.
Mm. That's absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
Mm.
So I have absolutely no idea how much of this is going to make it into the final cut of the video. For somebody who's committed to not editing very much at all, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the middle section. But now that we're here having this very real aspect of the conversation, all of the lawn people seem to have gone their own way. So I am happy about that. Um, One thing I do like to ask my guests as we come to the end of our conversation is there something that you would like to leave people with, whether it's a tool or a thought or a place to look?
I hope that today, just listening to our very spontaneous process of this, that you just feel a little bit less alone just in this moment. I hope that you give yourself that, that whether you resonate specifically with things that we've said or you just resonate with the fact that stuff doesn't work out like we think sometimes, I hope that you give yourself that while I'm speaking. And to take with you beyond this, I would say that there's an aspect of yourself that wants you to get to know it more. That by listening to this and getting to the end of this, it's like an invitation from an inner part of you that's been whispering that wants you to hear it a little louder. And you can take on journaling, you can sit in meditation, you can have an intention to get to know that part of yourself in dream tonight after you listen to this, but to just be willing to walk with me in the fact that there's a part of you that wants a little more airtime, a little more of a say in how your life goes. It's a very loving part. And to take on whatever action resonates with you to be able to hear it a little deeper.
Well said. Very good. Melanie, thank you for joining me. We have been trying to have this conversation for several months now, and I'm glad that we got to do it. And maybe we'll do it again sometime soon.
I would love to. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to help us get out to more people. Again, this is Erin Curran with The Secret of My Success. We are exploring what it means to live a fulfilling life. Until next time.